It all started with a simple command that sent shivers down my spine. "Hey, you, sir, get in." A voice growled from the shadows. I froze, unsure if I had heard correctly. The man standing by the car was cloaked in darkness, his face obscured except for a pair of piercing, cold eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. His tone left no room for negotiation. My heart raced as adrenaline surged through me. Was this some kind of prank? Or was I about to step into something far more sinister? I hesitated, taking a cautious step back. "Are you talking to me?" My voice trembled despite my best effort to sound confident. He didn't respond immediately, but instead leaned casually against the sleek black car, pulling out what looked like a small handgun from his coat pocket. My blood ran cold. He pointed it at me without hesitation, his lips curling into a menacing smirk. "I said get in," he repeated, his voice dripping with menace. There was no mistaking his intent now. This wasn't just a request, it was an ultimatum. The air around us grew heavier, almost suffocating, as faint strains of eerie music began to play somewhere in the distance. It felt surreal, like the universe itself was mocking me, signaling the beginning of a twisted game I hadn't asked to join. My mind raced with questions. Who was this man? What did he want from me? And why was I suddenly caught in this nightmare? Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the glint of steel in his hand kept me rooted to the spot. With no other choice, I reluctantly climbed into the car, each movement feeling like a death sentence. The car ride ended abruptly as the sleek black vehicle screeched to a halt in front of an abandoned warehouse. My captor, still silent and menacing, gestured for me to step out. The air was thick with tension, and every step I took felt like walking into the jaws of doom. As we entered the dimly lit building, the faint strains of eerie music grew louder, almost suffocating. Suddenly, the room was engulfed in darkness, and a chilling presence filled the space. Then, without warning, a blinding flash of light erupted, and he appeared. Genie. He wasn't what I expected. His form was otherworldly, glowing like a phantom, his translucent body shimmering with an ethereal light. Black smoke swirled around him, curling and twisting like living shadows. His eyes burned with an intensity that made my skin crawl, and his voice reverberated through the room like thunder. "You have summoned me," he declared, though it sounded more like an accusation than a statement. "What is your first wish? What is your first?" My mind raced. What could I possibly ask for? In that moment, overwhelmed by fear and desperation, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "I wish this nightmare would end." But instead of granting relief, the room shook violently, and an explosion rocked the building. Outside, flames erupted from a nearby structure, a small apartment complex now reduced to ashes. Panic surged through me as screams echoed in the distance. Genie's expression darkened, his glowing form flickering with rage. "You fool!" he roared, his voice shaking the very foundation of the warehouse. "Do you realize what you've done? Your careless words have caused destruction and chaos." He advanced toward me, his towering figure radiating menace. "You think this is a game? You think you can command me without consequences?" I stumbled backward, my heart pounding wildly. "I didn't mean to," I stammered, but Genie cut me off with a wave of his hand. The air around us crackled with energy, and the black smoke thickened, choking me. "You humans are all the same," he spat. "Selfish, reckless, and blind to the power you wield." Before I could respond, he raised his hand, and the ground beneath me began to crack. "I will take back control," he growled. Your wishes mean nothing unless you understand their weight. With that, everything went black. When I awoke, I found myself alone in the warehouse, the acrid smell of smoke lingering in the air. My head throbbed and guilt weighed heavily on my chest. The memory of the burning building haunted me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far darker. Jeannie's words echoed in my mind. Understand their weight. What had I unleashed? And how could I possibly undo the damage I'd caused? The chaos caused by my ill-fated wish with Jeannie still lingered in my mind, but there was no time to dwell on it. The man who had dragged me into this nightmare, Mr. Brighton, was pacing furiously in the dimly lit room, his face contorted with desperation. You don't understand, he muttered under his breath, running a hand through his disheveled hair. If I don't present a fiancé at tonight's family dinner, I lose everything, the inheritance, the business, everything. His voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time I saw vulnerability beneath his cold exterior. Pam, the woman introduced earlier as Mr. Brighton's girlfriend, stood near the door, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes darted nervously between Brighton and me, clearly uneasy about the situation. I can't do this, she finally blurted out, her voice trembling. This is insane. What if they find out? They'll destroy me. She shook her head vehemently, backing away as though the very idea of pretending to be engaged to Brighton terrified her. Brighton turned to her, his expression shifting from pleading to fury in an instant. You're backing out now? After everything I've done for you? He snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. But Pam didn't flinch. Instead, she glared at him, her fear giving way to defiance. You think money buys loyalty? You're wrong. I'm not risking my life for your stupid games. With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving behind a deafening silence. My heart sank as Brighton's shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked at me, his eyes hollow yet piercing. It's up to you now, he said quietly, almost resigned. My stomach churned. Me? Pretend to be his fiancé? The thought was absurd, yet the weight of his desperation pressed down on me. If I refused, he'd lose everything, and given the circumstances, I doubted he'd let me walk away unscathed. Before I could protest, Brighton grabbed my arm, his grip firm but not painful. Listen carefully, he hissed, pulling me closer. This isn't just about me. My family, they're ruthless. If they suspect anything, they won't hesitate to ruin us both. Do you understand? His words sent a chill down my spine. I nodded reluctantly, though every fiber of my being screamed to run far, far away. As we prepared to leave for the restaurant, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Dressed in borrowed clothes and wearing makeup that barely concealed my anxiety, I barely recognized the person staring back at me. Who was I kidding? This charade wouldn't hold up against scrutiny. Yet, as Brighton handed me a scripted backstory and whispered last-minute instructions, I realized I had no choice. For better or worse, I was stepping into the role of his fake fiancé, a role that might save him, or drag me deeper into this tangled web of lies. The restaurant was a grand affair, with crystal chandeliers casting soft light over polished mahogany tables. Despite the opulence, I felt like an imposter, every movement stiff and unnatural as I tried to play the role of Brighton's fiancé. Pam sat across from us, Her lips curled into a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She barely concealed her jealousy, shooting daggers at me whenever Brighton leaned in too close or whispered something in my ear. By the time the appetizers arrived, whispers had already begun to ripple through the room. Pam, it seemed, had been busy spreading rumors. "Did you hear?" one guest murmured to another, glancing pointedly in my direction. "Apparently, she's a professional con artist. That's why Mr. Brighton chose her, to make some kind of statement." My stomach churned as I caught fragments of their conversations, but I forced myself to keep smiling, pretending not to notice. Then, chaos erupted. A group of strangers stormed into the restaurant, their presence commanding immediate attention. One of them, a tall man with sharp features and piercing eyes, stepped forward, pointing directly at me. "That's her!" he exclaimed, his voice cutting through the hum of conversation. "She stole someone else's identity!" Gasps filled the room as all eyes turned toward me. Brighton froze, his fork clattering against his plate. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded, standing abruptly. But the accuser wasn't deterred. He held up a folder, slamming it onto the table. Inside were documents, photos, IDs, and what looked like surveillance footage, all supposedly proving that I was living under a stolen name. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but words failed me. The weight of the accusations crushed me, making it hard to breathe. This isn't true," I stammered, looking around for support, but no one met my gaze. Even Pam avoided eye contact, her earlier hostility now replaced by smug satisfaction. Brighton hesitated, his expression torn between disbelief and suspicion. "Explain yourself," he said finally, his tone cold and distant. "I can't," I cried, desperation creeping into my voice. "I don't know who these people are or why they're doing this." The leader of the group smirked, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Oh, don't play innocent. We've been tracking you for weeks. Your real name isn't on any official records. You don't exist." My heart sank. How could this be happening? Was this another twisted consequence of my wish with Jeannie? Or was it something more sinister? A deliberate setup orchestrated by someone in the room. As the crowd closed in, I glanced at Brighton, hoping for some sign of trust. Instead, I saw uncertainty etched across his face. Betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. If even he doubted me, how could I possibly survive this nightmare? The tension in the room had already reached a breaking point when Kirby, who had been quietly observing the chaos surrounding my identity crisis, suddenly became the center of attention. It started with an offhand comment, something about those people always causing trouble. The words slipped out carelessly, but they landed like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and several guests turned to glare at him, their expressions filled with disgust. "What did you just say?" Pam demanded, her voice sharp as a blade. Her earlier smugness was replaced by outrage as she stood up, pointing an accusing finger at Kirby. "Are you serious right now? Did you really just say that?" Kirby's face paled as he realized his mistake. No, it came out wrong. I didn't mean it like that," he stammered, raising his hands defensively. But the damage was done. Whispers erupted around us, growing louder and more accusatory by the second. Someone muttered, "I knew it," while another guest snapped, "How dare you speak like that here?" Before anyone could intervene, the doors burst open and uniformed officers stormed into the restaurant. Their presence sent shockwaves through the room. "Is there a Mr. Kirby here?" one of them asked, scanning the crowd. Kirby hesitated for a moment before reluctantly stepping forward. His attempt to explain himself was cut short as the officers led him away for questioning, leaving behind a stunned silence. Brighton looked visibly shaken. "This can't be happening," he muttered under his breath, running a hand through his hair. For once, even Pam seemed speechless, though her narrowed eyes suggested she wasn't entirely surprised by the turn of events. As the party descended into chaos, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Kirby. He had clearly misspoken, but the consequences were spiraling out of control. Still, amidst the confusion, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all connected. The accusations against me, Kirby's slip-up, and now the police involvement. Was this some elaborate scheme orchestrated by someone in the room? Or was it just a string of unfortunate coincidences? With Kirby gone and the atmosphere thick with hostility, Brighton finally turned to me. "We need to fix this," he said urgently, though his voice lacked conviction. "If we don't, none of us will make it out unscathed." But how could we possibly fix anything when everything felt so irreparably broken? The tension in the restaurant had barely subsided when Brighton suddenly dropped to one knee, pulling out a velvet box with a gleaming diamond ring inside. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward Louise Jenkinson, who stood frozen, her hand trembling slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Louise," Brighton began, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me?" For a moment, it seemed like a perfect romantic gesture, the kind of scene you'd see in a movie. But just as Louise whispered, "Of course I will," the door burst open. A striking woman strode in, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her piercing gaze locked onto Brighton, and she declared loudly, "Don't do this! She's lying! He's mine!" Gasps rippled through the crowd as chaos erupted. Louise spun around, her face flushed with anger. "Who are you?" she demanded, clutching the ring tightly. "How dare you interrupt something so sacred?" "I'm Sarah," the intruder shot back, her voice dripping with venom. "And I'm the one he's been seeing behind your back for months. Ask him yourself if you don't believe me." Brighton looked utterly bewildered, stammering, "Sarah, what are you doing here? This isn't real. It was never real." "Not real?" Sarah laughed bitterly, throwing up her hands. "Then why did you promise me we'd be together once your inheritance was secured? Why did you lie to me?" The argument escalated quickly, both women shouting accusations at each other, while guests murmured amongst themselves. Some sided with Louise, admiring her elegance and poise. Others sympathized with Sarah, believing her raw emotions revealed the truth. Caught in the crossfire, I felt torn. Brighton turned to me, desperation etched across his face. "You have to help me fix this," he pleaded. "Tell them it's not what they think." But how could I possibly intervene without making things worse? Every word I said risked alienating one side or exposing more secrets. My mind raced as I tried to find a solution. But before I could act, Louise let out an anguished cry. "Enough!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I won't fight over someone who can't even decide who he wants." With that, she tore off the ring and threw it at Brighton's feet before storming out of the room. Sarah hesitated, watching her rival leave, then glared at Brighton. "You've ruined everything," she spat, turning on her heel and following Louise out. The room was left in stunned silence, the weight of betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Brighton sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands, and I realized that no matter what choice I made next, nothing would ever be the same again. The air was already thick with tension when the spotlight shifted to Kirby. After Sarah's explosive accusation and Louise's dramatic exit, suspicions about Kirby began to simmer beneath the surface. Someone in the crowd, likely Pam, who seemed to thrive on chaos, decided it was time to dig deeper. "So, Mr. Kirby," she said loudly, her voice dripping with mockery, "when is your birthday? What do you do for a living? Do we even know your real name? Kirby froze, his face pale as he stumbled over his words. I, uh, I don't think that's relevant right now, he stammered, avoiding eye contact. But Pam wasn't satisfied. She leaned forward, her tone sharp and accusatory. Or maybe you can't answer because you're not who you claim to be. Murmurs erupted around the room. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier amusement turning into outright distrust. Brighton stepped in, trying to diffuse the situation. Enough of this nonsense, he snapped. We have more important things to deal with than interrogating Kirby. But before anyone could respond, a sudden commotion drew everyone's attention to the large screen mounted on the wall. A grainy video began to play, showing Kirby sitting in a dimly lit room with a group of men whose faces were obscured by hoods. The footage was unmistakable. He was handing them what looked like stacks of cash. A chilling silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Is this some kind of joke? Someone shouted, breaking the quiet. Another guest stood up, pointing at Kirby. He's working with criminals. He's been lying to us this whole time. Panic spread like wildfire. Women gasped, clutching their purses tightly while men scrambled toward the exits. Chairs scraped against the floor as people pushed past one another in a desperate bid to leave. Kirby tried to protest, his voice cracking under the weight of the accusations. This isn't what it looks like. I swear I'm innocent. But no one listened. Even Brighton, who had initially defended him, now stared at Kirby with a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. How could you? He muttered, shaking his head. I watched in stunned silence as Kirby's world crumbled around him. His attempts to explain only made things worse, each word sounding hollow and unconvincing. As the last of the guests fled the restaurant, leaving behind an eerie emptiness, Kirby collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, I considered stepping in to help him. But how could I trust someone who couldn't even defend himself? Whatever secrets Kirby was hiding, they had unraveled in the most catastrophic way possible. And now, all that remained was the bitter aftermath of shattered trust. The weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air as I confronted Kirby later that night. After everything that had transpired, the accusations, the video, the panicked exodus, I couldn't let it go. Not just for my sake, but for everyone he had manipulated. You owe us an explanation, I said firmly, stepping closer to him. His face was pale, his usual confidence replaced by a haunted look. For the first time, Kirby didn't try to deflect or lie. Instead, he sighed deeply, sinking into a chair. I used you all, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Every single one of you. Brighton, Pam, even Louise. They were pawns in my game. I needed money, connection, anything to secure my future. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was worse than I'd imagined. But before I could respond, he added something that stopped me cold. But there's more. Something no one knows. He hesitated, his hands trembling as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A medical report. I'm dying, he said flatly, holding it up for me to see. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the document. Stage 4 cancer. Terminal. The realization slammed into me, leaving me speechless. All this time, Kirby's manipulative behavior wasn't just greed. It was desperation. A man running out of time, clawing at anything within reach to leave some kind of legacy behind. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice shaking. Because I don't want to die alone, he replied, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. And because maybe you can understand. You've been through hell tonight, too. Betrayed by people you trusted, judged without knowing the whole story. We're not so different, you and I. His words struck a nerve. I thought about how far I'd come since the start of this chaotic evening, how much I'd endured and discovered about myself. And yet here was Kirby, stripped of his defenses, revealing the fragile humanity beneath his calculated facade. I wanted to hate him, to walk away and never look back. But something held me rooted to the spot. Compassion? Pity? Or perhaps the recognition that we all make mistakes when backed into a corner. Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't abandon him. Not now. The next morning, I woke up to an unsettling silence. Kirby was gone. His room was empty, save for a handwritten letter on the table. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Thank you," it began, "for seeing me when no one else did. You've reminded me what it means to be human." The words blurred through my tears, but one line stood out. "I may not have much time left, but thanks to you, I'll spend it differently." Panic gripped me. Had he run away again? Was this his way of saying goodbye? But then as I stepped outside, I saw them. Two gleaming bicycles leaning against the garage door. Tucked under their handles was a photograph of Kirby, smiling brighter than I'd ever seen. It wasn't just gratitude. It felt like hope. In that moment, I realized something profound. Life isn't about avoiding pain or protecting reputations. It's about connection and growth. Helping Kirby wasn't just an act of kindness. It changed both of us. Though uncertain about where life would take him, and me, I knew we had forged something unbreakable. Love and compassion transcend even the hardest circumstances. Amid the chaos and tension, moments of humor provided a strange but necessary relief. Kirby, attempting to learn how to dance for the first time, became an unintentional source of laughter. His clumsy movements ended with him tumbling into a potted plant, leaving everyone in stitches. "Dancing is harder than it looks," he groaned, brushing dirt off his suit. Even I couldn't help but chuckle despite the weight of everything happening around us. Later, when we decided to try out the two new bicycles, another comedic disaster unfolded. Kirby, eager but uncoordinated, mounted one of the bikes only to lose balance immediately. The bike tipped over, pulling the other one down with it and leaving both tangled in a heap. "Well," Kirby muttered, rubbing his bruised knee, "I guess this means no Tour de France for me." Surprisingly, instead of frustration, the mishap sparked genuine connection. We spent the next hour laughing as we fixed the bikes together, sharing stories about our own failures and fears. The recurring joke about buying puppies to mend broken hearts resurfaced during these lighter moments. "What if every problem could be solved with a puppy?" Kirby joked, half serious. It was absurd yet somehow comforting. A reminder that life's challenges, no matter how overwhelming, can always find solace in small joys. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.